The homicide that we're going to discuss today took place in District 3. It's M5500. It occurred on July 20th of this year. It's a Sunday that it occurred on at about 2 o'clock a.m. in the morning, around the time of bar close at 2601 West State Street. It occurred at a tavern within the city of Milwaukee. And basically what happened at that location, and the victim, Mr. Williams, was inside that tavern. It's also a gentleman's club. He was wearing pretty flashy clothing. He had a fancy ring on that was valued at around $6,000, a pinky ring. He was wearing very high-end glasses that were valued at $1,000, and he was spending quite a bit of money within inside the establishment, which caught the attention of the suspect, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith and Mr. Williams did not have any type of connection, but they were inside the inside the tavern at the same time, socializing. It's also a gentleman's club, so he was spending a great deal of money inside the tavern, which caught the eye of our suspect. He also was wearing very flashy clothing. He had a pinky ring on that was valued at around $6,000, and very expensive glasses that were also valued at around $1,000. So Mr. Smith, who is our suspect, is inside the tavern at the same time as Williams is, flashing his money, catches his eye, and looks at Mr. Williams as being a easy robbery or easy mark. Watching him throughout the night and closer towards the end of when the tavern is about ready to close, Mr. Smith leaves prior to the victim leaving. Shortly thereafter that, Mr. Williams, the victim, leaves the tavern, and Mr. Smith plans to rob him. Mr. Smith is armed with a semi-automatic handgun, a 9mm is what we believe. The weapon in this was never recovered. He approaches Mr. Williams outside of the tavern and demands his property, demands his glasses, demands his ring. The robbery becomes somewhat frustrated, and the suspect, Mr. Smith, ends up pistol whipping Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams then at that point begins to turn over some of his items, but the robbery is still somewhat frustrated, and the victim Williams attempts to run away, at which point Mr. Smith discharges his firearm at the victim, striking him multiple times. The victim then stops at some point and turns over his property to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith flees the scene, and the victim dies shortly thereafter at the scene. There's video surveillance that depicts the incident, basically shows the altercation that occurs outside. However, the video surveillance was not of good quality, so you're not able to really identify anybody from the video surveillance, but it does kind of lay out exactly what witnesses recall seeing. There was multiple witnesses outside that were able to get a good look at this incident, and the suspect himself. The case actually goes cold at that point for about 48 hours, and the suspect in this ends up getting into an argument with his live-in girlfriend. A domestic violence situation occurs, and during that domestic violence situation, Mr. Smith discloses that he was involved in a robbery shooting, and he does this out of threats to intimidate the girlfriend during this domestic violence incident. He indicates that he's involved in this incident at this tavern and makes these threats towards the girlfriend. Shortly thereafter, he leaves the residence and she calls the police. The police are in the process of investigating the domestic violence when they get a tip that, basically the girlfriend says that her live-in boyfriend was involved in this homicide robbery at the tavern, and that's how we end up getting Mr. Smith's name. Mr. Smith is shortly thereafter apprehended, and he gives a complete statement basically discussing what I just talked about. He lays out everything that I talked about in his confession. He admits to shooting the victim, but basically says it was out of frustration because the victim ran away and it was mainly an accidental discharge. We never do recover the weapon in this incident, we do a lineup. We do get a few witnesses that identify him as being the shooter as well, and then in combination with the girlfriend, the statement that he gave to the girlfriend, and then the statement that he gave to police. This case was charged as a first-degree intentional homicide. I don't know if you want to, this is the scene photos from the actual location. And like I said, there was video surveillance, but it did not give a clear view of the offender, but it does lay out the incident in collaboration with Mr. Smith's statement. Is there any questions?
You said there was video coverage The quality wasn't very good. Do you know how many cameras they had?
I believe they had 2 different angles that were taken.
Just inside?
It was, they were outside videos. It was on a Meritech store, a phone store that was nearby, so they were outside cameras, yes, and there was 2 different angles that were captured. And it was actually the security guard that was running the video equipment was able to kind of hone in on this incident and pan it, which was kind of an unusual situation in this case as well. When he was interviewed, he did not initially come forward during the initial investigation. When we went to get the video and then realized that the video was being manipulated, he did indicate that he witnessed the incident. So he became a witness as well as capturing the incident on video in a much more detail. However, the video was still far enough away that you weren't able to pick out any types of faces or make any type of identification.
So there's no video on the tavern? The video?
No, the video, there was video inside the tavern, so you do see Mr. Smith inside the tavern, the suspect. You see Mr. Williams inside the tavern. They don't really have any interaction within the tavern. You can tell that Mr. Williams, our victim, is very flashy. He is seen buying a lot of drinks inside the tavern and doing things like that. According to patrons, he was doing that as well. You do see Mr. Smith, but you don't see any type of connection really within the tavern, and there's no outside video surveillance. So we do have enough video from inside the tavern to put both of them at that location prior to the incident occurring.